God, I acknowledge to you that this is a challenging topic. So I ask you, please, to help me to speak very clearly and to tell the truth and to be gentle about this. I pray that you'll be with each mom and dad who hears this today, that they would have a real sense of wisdom and understanding about this topic. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name. Welcome to Paint a Beautiful Picture. Today we're going to talk about appropriate affection and teaching a child to discern what is bad touch. A lot of times in schools nowadays, kids are taught the concept of good touch, bad touch. And I guess I'm a little opposed to that language, and you might understand by the end of the episode, but I do think that kids do indeed need to understand that there is such a thing as bad touch. That one I definitely do. You might say to me, why in the world are we going to talk about this? That's a very fair question. Because 1 in 4 young boys before they are 10 years old is in some way, shape, or form sexually molested or, heaven forbid, outright raped. And the statistics today are 1 in 2 or 1 in 3, depends on which kinds of studies you look at. Little girls are sexually molested or raped. I know those are not facts anybody wants to hear about. Trust me, it's really bad. And it does horrible things in a child's life. And they go on and on and on and on. But it happens, and so we need to handle it. Let me say this to you. If you are appropriately affectionate with your child, you hug and kiss them, you hold them, you tickle them, and I don't mean tickle them till they wet their pants on the floor and they're screaming. I mean, 10 seconds worth of it's still fun and they're laughing. If you are physically affectionate with your child in an appropriate sense, they will already know what good touch looks like. They will. And you also can say to them on a consistent basis, people who don't know you, they don't have any reason to touch you or play with you. I always say to kids, you know what? You do not walk into Walmart and wrestle with someone you never met before. They're like, yeah, man. But they will wrestle with their friends. Okay? They'll tussle with somebody that they like. That's such a great example for all of us to understand. You can be physically affectionate in a very appropriate sense with people that you know and like. Someone that you don't know, that person has no business at all doing the same things with you. That's a good one that kids can get by the time they're even 6, 7, which is a good thing. Of course, I think that you have been with me long enough if you've watched me, and if you haven't, and this is your first day, I'm really glad you're with me. It's an interesting day to start. But I will say this to you. If you are actively involved in your child's life, constantly participating with them, have a strong emotional connection, this becomes less and less likely and far less of a problem. If you work 60 hours a week and your child is always in the care of someone else, and then when you get a hold of them, you're busy eating dinner, washing them up, and sticking them to bed, a lot of things can be going on that you don't know anything about because there isn't time for you to learn. So when you are appropriately affectionate with your child and your child understands that there is relationship involved, they're less likely to be harmed. However, let me say this to you, and I'm very sad to have to say this. I'm still going to say this to you. Oftentimes, especially little girls, the people by whom they are molested is their uncle or their grandfather or a neighbor, someone they already know and trust. And so you have to learn how to say to your child, if anyone touches you at all, I mean, just hug and kiss you, right? Which should seem pretty harmless, but you have a bad feeling about that. You need to talk to me because kids' instincts are actually pretty good. So I have to say this. When I was a little girl, about 8 years old, we changed churches. We went from one to another. And that pastor would put his hands on me, and I would feel really yucky. And he wasn't doing it in any way, shape, or form inappropriately. And I recently found a picture, a photograph where I was sitting on a horse and he had his hand on my leg and the bell went off. I was so glad I was never alone with him because I could really see in that photograph, like, that's not where you would put your hand on an 8-year-old little girl. That's not okay. All I'm saying to you is a lot of things might happen that your child doesn't have language to talk to you about or explain to you. And so if they tell you, I don't want to be by that person anymore, I don't like that person, like, that's yucky to me, that I'd really like you to respect your child enough. Don't do it. If they tell you over and over again they don't want to be with that babysitter ever again, then I'm begging you to pay attention. And I don't care if that person is your favorite aunt on the planet or the sweetest grandpa you ever knew. If your child is saying to you, I never want to go there again, I want you to listen to that. Okay? So you can actually use the language bad touch. I always told this to my kids. So I'm going to go through this with you, and maybe it will help you understand. Again, I am unapologetically a Christian. I'm going to acknowledge that to you. If you are not, I respect that. I really and truly do. I'm not saying anything to you about how you've got to do things in terms of your personal faith. What I am saying to you is that I'm going to describe what I did in things that helped my children understand who they were and about their bodies and what that meant. Okay? If it's helpful to you, I'm going to be so glad about that. All right. So I would give my children a bath, and I would say, wow, these are very manly hands. They're going to grow up and be strong, strong hands. These are very strong arms, and they are going to grow up and be beautiful arms of a good man. This is a very good heart, and God loves this heart, and God has a purpose for the life that this heart sustains. I would wash their feet. These are beautiful feet, and someday these feet will go far. Which both my son's feet their feet have gone far. Someday these feet will go far, but you will stand upon these feet on solid ground. I'm doing my best to give you solid ground to stand on. Even when I would wash their personal parts, I would say to them, this body right here was created by God for one woman. And one day when you grow up, you will love your wife. And this body is no one else's. It isn't even yours. There's a really interesting passage in Corinthians that talks about marriage, and it said, your body does not belong to you. It actually belongs to your wife. Your body does not belong to you. It actually belongs to your husband. And I told my sons that. This body was made for one woman. And one day you will serve your wife and love your wife and work alongside of your wife with this very body. This body is a gift from God, and no one, including you, has a right to misuse this body. They understood that very well. All right? So when someone touched my son inappropriately, that day, I mean, within an hour, he came and told me. There aren't a whole lot of 8-year-old kids in the world who are going to go to their mom and say, moms and dads, if you're watching this, your children don't need to be here at this moment. My son came to me and he said, this guy put his hands down my pants and he was touching my penis and my testicles. I was yelling at him, and I want you to do something. No joke, this really happened. And oh my word, I guarantee you that I did something about that. That's called fondling, in case you're wondering. It's not necessarily horrible abuse, but it still was not appropriate and really freaked out my son. And he knew enough to come and talk to me, and he was perfectly okay talking to me. My kids could talk to me about anything and everything, and oh, they did, and that was awesome, and we dealt with that. Okay, so If you never talk about anything sexual with your kids, if you never discuss anything with them about their body, if you treat their body like it's something dirty or horrible, or, oh, we don't talk about that, and you never, if someone's hurting them, they're not going to tell you. You've got to have appropriate affection with your child. In other words, such a love relationship, not just in the way that you touch them, but in the way that your soul reaches out to their soul, and their heart and their mind is safe with you, and they can come and say to you, huh, whoa, this happened and that was not cool. Now, I will say this to you. My sons beat the law of averages because both of them went through some things, but my younger son was really through some stuff. And he did not come and talk to me right away because it was a relative with whom he was extremely close, and also because he had a lot of shame. Again, your kids don't need to be in the room for this, okay? Even a young person feels pleasure when someone sexually stimulates them, okay? And so the challenge is that they know this is wrong, but it actually feels good at some level. And so a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment, a lot of guilt, a ton of really bad emotional stuff goes on with that child. And they very well may not be able to talk to you about it if they're a more shy or more cautious child. And I have to tell you that a lot of pedophiles will say to a young person, you know how much I love you. This is really bad when it's a grandpa or an uncle with a little girl, incidentally. And I know this one from counseling. You know how much I love you, but if you tell your mom or your dad, we'll never be able to spend any time together again. So we won't be able to go fishing. We won't be able to get together at Christmas. I mean, the guilt and the trash that some people lay onto a kid to keep that kid a slave to their own pathetic sexual appetites are awful. And the bad news is, if you don't find it out and it goes for years and years and years and years, it's going to have permanent tragic consequences for your kids. So they've really got to know. Now, you need to clarify with them. If in fact someone grabs you by the arm, like on a bus when you're trying to, punch out another kid, or if someone grabs your shoulder because your body is all out of control and you're trying to fight and pull this girl's hair and act like a fool, that's not bad touch. That's a disciplinary measure. I'm not saying if it's good or bad. I'm just telling you that's a different thing than what we're talking about. But if someone's trying to touch you in a personal way, they don't really have any business touching parts of your body in particular ways, and you are uncomfortable with that, or you have a really bad feeling, you come and talk to me right away, and we will take care of it. And then you need to do it. Don't say we will take care of it, and then the person's like, oh, they're lying. I have really, really important news for you. Unless a kid's been watching TV that they don't have any business watching, unless they've been on the internet and they've seen stuff they don't have any business seeing, kids do not know about sexuality. They're hardly ever making it up. I'm not saying they can't, but it's not terribly likely. Okay? Now I'm going to hit one other thing that's really a big deal that parents often misunderstand. And that is, and it's more common with boys, but it does happen with girls. Kids go through a developmental stage, okay, and it's called a homosexual phase because it's the same sex. That's what homosexual is. So boys, they will sometimes touch one another's penises. I mean, they're real curious. They're pretty prone to touch their own. I mean, literally from the time they're like 5 or 6 months old and they find out they have one. It's no different to them than their fingers or their toes or their ears. It's just something that's part of their body. That's not weird or terrible to them. So they're kind of curious about the other guys. And that doesn't mean they're gay. That's not what that means. It means they're normal. And they go through that maybe 6 months to a year, and girls have cooties and girls are disgusting and I can't stand girls. That does not make them homosexual. It makes them normal. All kids go through it. That's somewhere like 7 to 9. Girls, on the other hand, don't hit this till like 10 to 12. They always have girlfriends, but they have nothing that looks or seems or feels sexual. I'll never forget this. I had a really good friend. She had long black hair, like past her bottom. She was a beautiful girl. Oh my word, that girl was gorgeous. We were really good friends. There was nothing weird in our friendship. And this one night, we were spending the night, and she asked me if I ever kissed a girl. I was like, hardly. And I had actually kissed a boy when I was 12, so I'd never kissed a girl. And she asked me if she could kiss me, and I was like, okay. Because, I mean, we were really good friends. It was gross, I just got to tell you. But to her, I believe she was just doing what would be normal exploration at that phase of her life. I say that to you because oftentimes parents find out their kid did something with someone and they're like, oh, that kid's bad and you're never going to be around that kid anymore. It may require more supervision on your part, and it actually would include an intelligent discussion on your part that kids feel these kinds of things sometimes. And actually, that's just a normal thing that you're going to feel. My son came home to me one day and explained some things to me that he had heard in school. And he said, Mom, that's really gross, but it's probably not as gross as kissing a girl. And I said to him, oh, don't worry, in a couple years, that'll change. So he came home this one day, like maybe 2 years later. No pre-conversation or anything. He goes, yeah, Mom, you were right. That changed. I knew just exactly what we were talking about. So kids do go through that. Don't let that freak you out. But you're talking someone 10 to 15 years older than them, even if the child's 5 and you're dealing with like a 15, 16-year-old teenager. Yeah, that's not appropriate. That's bad touch. So your child needs to be able to discriminate between appropriate affection, which you should be giving them in generous amounts so that they don't feel compelled to go try to find it somewhere else, especially if they're a tactile person, and bad touch. I hope this has been helpful to you today. I fully expect to get a ton of email, and I hope that I do. I have dealt with this extensively, as you may be able to tell, and there are certainly things that can happen in our world that can heal us and get us past that. But I hope that you will circumvent a lot of those problems by teaching your child and laying down the principle of appropriate affection from you and how to discriminate what is bad touch. My challenge question for you today is, if my child were harmed by someone, would he or she be able to talk to me about it? That's a really vital question, and it has a lot to do with how you are and the way in which you react as a parent to what your child has to say to you. I want to acknowledge to you that oftentimes kids feel a lot of guilt and shame. And these are never good feelings. And as a parent, you have the opportunity to bring resolution to those things. And the more quickly you do, the healthier the child's going to be. Okay. Oftentimes, just that innocent little explorative encounter that kids will have, they feel so bad. Sometimes parents will find out, they'll spank the kid, they'll discipline the kid, they'll yell and scream at the kid, they'll say, I can't believe, because they don't understand what a normal developmental stage looks like and ways that kids behave in those stages. You don't want to do harm to your child. You don't want them to feel ashamed of their body. You just want them to understand this is your body. It isn't really anyone else's to touch or to misuse. I'm going to use that language. It's not anyone else's to have anything to do with this body. It belongs to your husband. This body, it belongs to your wife. You need to protect this body. That's about the self-explorative and looking at other kids for a while thing. But you really don't want them to go through life with shame and guilt, especially not shame about your body, because you got to live inside of this part of flesh right here that you get. And so you want them to know it's okay. I still love you. I still accept you. I don't want you repeating this behavior. It isn't necessarily a good choice or a good decision, so don't keep going forward with this. But I really understand what you did, and nothing's wrong with you. It's normal. You just don't need to keep this going. And so don't lay guilt and shame on your child. It doesn't really help them. It doesn't help foster a good relationship with them between the two of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know this is kind of a heavy topic, and I hope that it was helpful to you. If it was, feel free to share it with a friend, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.